We're live.
All right, we go to 10 up, right?
Yep.
All right, one, you know who I am, so I'm going to introduce myself. I've already done the kind of background talk in this class, etc. I'm going to be real transparent with you, okay? I didn't put a lot of advanced preparation into this course on today's preparation, specifically for you. Last phrase is important, okay? You're going to hear from some of the things I'm living. I'm going to use an example or two from the past, and we've had good conversation leading up to that, and I think we can even have even deeper and more meaningful conversation afterwards. I think one of the things that brings sport management to life, sport business rather, is when we use those examples. It's a little bit like case law. If we remember the case or the movie behind it, it's pretty easy to remember the bylaw. Now, just a few things. This is a governance class. We're going to go through today and Wednesday. I'm a systems guy, okay? If there's three things for me from a leadership standpoint that I'll use on a day-to-day basis, systems, so that we can duplicate ourselves into the people, okay? You're going to have to do that. You're going to have to do it with clarity, and they need to reflect what your core mission and vision is. Otherwise, you're not going to get there. Two, I think it's important to simplify, simplify, simplify. And three, as much as you are able, one of the most important things you can do is treat each person like an individual. Because each person, whether it's a student athlete, whether it's a specific program, whether it's a head coach, whether it's alumnus, fan, sponsor, it's a long list, folks, to treat them like an individual. At the end of the day, one of the most important things you get paid to do in these roles is to make very good decisions. And those good decisions are going to come from having a good business plan and good systems. You know, a lot of times people are going to come up to you and say, hey man, you know, you make pretty good money. How can I get a job like yours? You know, I'm getting ready to graduate, or, you know, somebody's getting ready to get out of the military or whatever. How can I get your job? Well, we all climb a ladder of a variety of experiences to get to that point. I mean, my first job was, you know, as a number 3 assistant in a Division I baseball program, making $2,300 a year. Okay? That doesn't mean we all have to start at that amount in that way, but the majority do, because you put together a body of work, and you have to live those experiences to put those things together from that standpoint. We're going to go through, I got 5 simple C's. I just came from running a staff meeting. I've got a lot of things in the queue. I've got coaching changes. I've got searches. I spent, you know, this time last week flying to Indianapolis just for one meeting, okay? It was an 8-hour meeting. 137 research proposals, but get through it, come back, and you're back in the throes of doing other things. I've got a lot of budgetary items. We just talked about having a fee referendum. Fee referendum is just one of many sources of revenue. Sometimes those things are really hard to explain to certain audiences because there's such an involved process. I'll actually walk you through some of the elements. It's actually simplified, but it's still pretty complex. Okay, how do you get to these points? 5 C's for me, really, and probably in this order. You know, what we do is going to deal with cash, which is my C word for just talking about you've got to have an in-depth understanding of gender equity and what that means, how you bring it to life in your planning. 2, compliance. Compliance can be a lot of different things. We automatically think of NCAA, but gender equity in itself is federal compliance. Okay? Look for gender equity in the NCAA manual, you're not going to find it there. Why? Because there's a governing entity way above the NCAA that governs that. That's the Office of Civil Rights, because they're the legal entity that is the police force behind gender equity or Title IX, which is housed in the Department of Education federally from that standpoint. Compliance can mean a lot of other things on a campus. I think I've got 5 different cases going on. And remember, I've got more than one department. You look at me and you see somebody oversees athletics, but I'm vice president, so I've got a division. Okay, so I've got a collection of departments, and within those, I got a handful of cases. Everything from non-academic grievances to, you know, NCAA secondary violations, and, you know, a number of other things in there. And you're going to have to balance those. You're going to have people within your division doing the investigative work on those cases. Again, it comes back to they'll pay us to make good decisions. That's one of the most important things. Well, we're not immediately, upon graduation or our first or second or third job over a handful of years, collected necessarily enough experience to be able to see the wide expanse of possible answers for the question, what's going on here now, and then make good decisions. The third C would be competitiveness. Okay, you can define that in a lot of different ways. You may have tiers of competitiveness within a department itself. Okay, or if I'm in professional sport, I want a competitive makeup, face, attitude in my minor league system. But how important is it to me that those minor league teams win? It's important to me that those players know how to win. But winning is going to be at the major league level. Within your approach, a number of athletic departments in America at the Division I and II level that have 1, 2, 3 different tiers within the department. If it's a department that also deals with club and recreational sports, they may have 6 or 7 different tiers. At the end of the day, what do those tiers reflect? It reflects the business plan, how much money they're going to put into them. Okay? And by virtue of how much money they're putting into them, how they do the performance evaluation of those folks, what the goals are, and having to meet those goals is going to be in there. What happens if they don't meet those goals? You get paid to make another decision. Are you going to renew or non-renew? Okay? Those are hard. But you're paid to sit down with those folks and say, hey, here are our goals for the year ahead. You know, it's just not the release that says, okay, I just signed you to a multi-year contract. Okay? There are a bunch of benchmarks and checkpoints along the way that at the end of the day, you're going to oversee. You may not directly. I might say, hey, you're his direct report. But you meet with me weekly, and you give me progress reports on these 4 sports. Okay? And where we're at on it. You get stuck, you find me. The fourth one is character. The Greek word for character means your mark. Okay? You know, when you get into marketing and branding, it's your value proposition. What sort of mark? Not just literally, you know, is it a Nike swoosh, is it a Michigan M, or, you know, that UT, or that's your logo, but what's behind that? What's the character of that? You know, a lot of times, one of the most powerful examples to me on mark and character is, does anybody know what the most lucrative single game television contract is in college football? And I mean non-bowl game, 1 game, 2 schools. What's that?
Alabama, Auburn?
No, but those are good guesses. Actually, Army Navy. It's Army Navy. Okay, and that is a very long contract. Why? Well, think about it in terms of character. Think about it in terms of your mark. That game is watched worldwide. Okay, a lot of times those teams are going into that game, and there have been times where they've gone into that and they're both 1-9. Okay, well, why are so many people worldwide watching that? Well, because of what the Navy Brigade and the long gray line of West Point represent. That's a character behind that. That's a character behind that game. They just don't casually watch that game. They passionately watch that game. But that is the most lucrative single game, regular season television contract in all college football, and has for a long time. Okay? But it's reflective of that, and I think there are a lot of instructive things from a sport business standpoint in terms of the game management and pageantry of that game and how you negotiate that contract. Then the fifth one is a very important one, is community. Okay? In the absence of having a connection to community with folks, what sort of meaning do you have? You know, I mean, if we're going to do it, it has to have meaning. It has to move us. And one of the great things about sport, it's one of the few things that involve you physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually all at the same time. There are very few things in your everyday walk of life that are going to do that. Dancing does. Your hallucinogenic drugs do that. My wife hates it when I use this example. Sex does that. There are very few things, though. Sport is one of those things, and sport is done in community. Done well, it brings people together. I mean, you know, the Olympics, once out of every 4 years, whether it's winter or summer, the world comes together. The World Cup will be this summer. You know, that's centered around one sport. It's a very powerful thing. You're getting ready to go to Dallas to the Final Four, okay? I mean, everybody probably watched some portion of basketball over the last 4 days. Why? Because of the unpredictability of the outcome. You know, you probably didn't beat or pick Mercer to beat Duke, okay? You probably didn't pick Dayton to win. You know, why? Because it was an unpredictable outcome. And because of that unpredictability, it brings people together in powerful ways. I'm going to figure out. All right, I already did that part. Now I'm going to take a hard left turn here, and I'm going to walk you through an example. We might not even get beyond this example in the rest of the PowerPoint today. I shared a lot of what we do is going to be based on making really good decisions. You say, well, I'm a rational and reasonable person. I can do that. Well, the question is, how much of the information do you have to do that? Polarities. All right, let me give you just a real simple word picture. It means you've got something over here and something over here, and they're opposite. Okay? All right, inhale for a minute. Take air in. Now exhale. Are they the same or are they opposite? They're opposite. Okay? There's one other thing that's real key in that. If they're not working together, which means they're interdependent, what's going to happen? Are you going to remain alive? No. So they're interdependent opposites. And one of the key skills to develop is, it's one thing to have the knowledge about sport. The other thing is how to take that knowledge and untangle a lot of things. I'm not a person who really believes you're going to deal with many problems in the business of sport. Now, the word you use to describe them may actually be that word problem. Okay? To me, a problem is either or. Okay? When I asked you to inhale and exhale, that was both and. Which means that it's a polarity. You have to figure out how to take those two opposite things and bring them together because they're interdependent. And if you do that, you're going to go up. If those two sides are having a big fight with little sticks, you're never going to meet your goals. And that's a lot of where you'll spend your time. If you want to get into college athletics, professional athletics, and some sort of director, executive director, VP, president, any of those types of roles, do not do it unless you enjoy being with people. That wasn't the end of the sentence. And unless you enjoy dealing with polarities and managing and directing and leading people and untangling things so that you can make really good decisions that move towards a higher purpose. We were talking about fee referendums a bit ago. Yeah, it's really easy to say, okay, we'll vote yes on this. We're going to have sand volleyball this year, women's soccer in that year. So, well, yeah, that's a give back. But what in the bigger picture is that? So, well, that's $2 more per semester credit hour. That's 57, in terms of the revenue of the department, that's 57%. How much has the university grown over the last 5 years? 40%. So what's that do? That creates revenue in addition to those two things. Why are those two things there? Well, those two things there have to be a part of a strategic plan because we're trying to abide by a law, okay? That's a fancy way of saying it increases the revenue in a department, and by virtue of that revenue, some of that revenue goes to those initiatives. The other goes to all your other initiatives. And believe me, there's always a lot of needs, okay? Let me talk to you a little bit about polarities. These are not linear, okay? These are not that simple that 1 + 1 = 2. It's not that simple from that standpoint. They can't be solved with either or. You got to figure out the both and. How can I do both that, sand volleyball and soccer, and take care of these facility or scholarship or transportation or these needs over here? That's where your business plan comes together, okay? They're interdependent, as I shared. The other way to think of that is they share mutual needs, okay? The simple act of inhaling and exhaling, they share mutual need, okay? Your body needs oxygen to fill your lungs and take that oxygen to your brain, and all the other parts of you as a living organism need to remain alive and function well. All right, so how do we manage them? A lot of times this deals with complaints, okay? One of my favorite, one of the courses I used to teach in this discipline is psychosocial sport. What do we call it here, like sport and culture or something? It's kind of the whole socioeconomic.
Yeah, sport, culture, society.
There it is, a little bit longer one. One of these, I used to teach it in the spring semester, and I can't remember which university, but one of the assignments I gave, usually in February, is around Martin Luther King Day. was to read, it's about a 10-page deal, it's called A Letter from Birmingham Jail. Well, who wrote it? Well, Martin Luther King did. If you've never read it, just Google it, it's on the web, you can read it, but it's a great leadership treatise in a really tough time in our country. You know, I wouldn't be sitting in, or speaking in a classroom of this cultural diversity, you know, in that time period. That's in my lifetime. I was born in 1961. The 4 things he said in that letter, okay, this is my boiled down synopsis of it. He said, 1, know your adversary, okay, and connect with them. You've got to connect and engage your adversary. That's hard. I mean, if you got a complaint, last thing you want to do is go talk to the person you got a complaint with. You see, engage your adversary. 2, know the facts. Oh man, what great advice. He said, 3, purify. I got to explain that one a little bit. Martin Luther King was a big fan of Gandhi, okay? And what he meant by that was purify your mission. You have to ask yourself the question, okay, I'm going to engage my adversary, know the facts. Now, I got to remember what the role of, in his case, it was a cause. You know, in my case, it might be a department, a program, an initiative, a project. But don't lose sight of what that is. Real clear, real simple, don't lose sight of it. And then 4thly, he said, prepare a battle. Most of the time, when we're dealing with complaints, those 4 things happen, but in the opposite order. People get to battle, they get off point and forget what their whole mission was, that whole purification thing. They didn't take the time to collect the facts because they never engaged their adversary, and now you get a big fight with little sticks. It's going to be even harder to unravel had you followed his wisdom there. Okay? And it was a very non-combative cause agent. And it changed. We were just talking about Title IX. Martin Luther King had a lot to do with passage of Title VII. Okay? Which says, in layman's terms, regardless of your race or creed, reach out to the other. Whoever that other is, everyone matters. And that's my interpretation. Let me walk through define. See, like King, you got to define who the stakeholders are. They may be an adversary. You got to collect the information. We're going to look at a polarity map in a minute. So that's what that's referring to. You got to understand the upsides and the downsides. Okay, what are the possible good things? What are the possible not good things? If you over-focus on one side, on one thing, one goal, will it sabotage your actual results on the other side of things? Okay? Use that fee referendum. If all your money's going to one thing, are you over-focusing on it to the extent it's going to hurt your other programs? Well, my quick answer would be yeah. You know, if you over-focus on one revenue sport, if you over-focus on new sports, if you over-focus, whatever it is. You know, you go through, and I've got a long meeting this afternoon to, got a couple positions that have been open for about 10 days, head coaching positions. And one of the things the committee has to bring to me is the question for the candidates when they do a phone interview. Well, a lot of times groups will bring, this one probably won't because they know me, but they'll bring questions, and one of them will be to ask them what their greatest weakness is. I said, no, we're not asking that. They said, well, we want to know what it is. I said, no, ask them what their greatest strength is. Well, why? I said, because if they're a highly committed person, if they over-focus on their strength, that's also their greatest weakness. Okay? And I think you'll find that to be true. Another question there, are your solutions, are they going to be reliant on one another? It's going to be like a little bit like inhaling and exhaling. Are they going to be mutually dependent, interdependent? And you have to understand that not one side of, if you got a dilemma, remember problems, a problem's not a both and. That's an either or. If you're in a both and situation, then they're going to be interdependent. So you got to take care of both parties here. Going to a vote means you're trying to take care of a lot of parties. It's pretty complex. Okay, if you mismanage them, if you define a polarity instead of, if you define it as a problem, means you diagnosed it wrong, you didn't find out the facts, you didn't engage the adversaries, all that. If you misdiagnose them, what are some of the results you're gonna have? Well, at the bottom, I mean, polarities, you're either gonna win-win, or you're gonna lose, okay? You can't just inhale. You're gonna have to inhale and exhale. They're mutual, okay? So that's why it's either win-win or lose. If you misdiagnose it, what you're gonna find out is the solution's gonna create a big resistance, okay? Fee referendum. If somebody doesn't understand, if they simply only see one part of a solution, then it's gonna become an impediment, or it's gonna be a source of resistance. You won't win a vote or whatever. You won't get enough votes. And the more intense one point of view is, the greater your resistance. All right, you're looking at that and you go, whoa, what in the world is that? This is actually from an assignment a long time ago. I shouldn't say a long time ago. Maybe it was. Right about 06, 07. I did it at another university. And I was looking at it earlier this morning. What you're going to find is, and I'll walk you through it in a general sort of way. I'm going to give you a little context about where it took place. Okay? I was an athletic director at a university about this size, about 8,000 students. It was in north central West Virginia. That county had like 18 different coal boroughs. Great athletics. They're probably about 20 minutes from Morgantown, WVU. Those little coal camps had actually developed like 3 NFL Pro Football Hall of Famers. People like Rich Saban grew up, Lou Saban grew up in Monongah, which is one of the coal camps in that county. Rich Rodriguez grew up in Grandtown, one of the coal camps in that. I mean, it was a hard life, really hard life. So what was going on there? What was it trying to get done? This was a huge project, this one page, just months, actually, probably about 2 years of work. They needed facilities. You think our facilities are challenging. Oh my word. Now you're close. Of course, there's not even any flat land there, which means there's not any drainage, which means, and the climate stinks, et cetera, et cetera. All right, up here is the higher purpose. Does this have a little pointer doodad?
I don't think that one does. No.
Okay. At the very top there, see where it says effective athletic facilities and community engagement? That's a fancy way of saying we need to update our stuff. 60% of every outdoor practice at that institution and in that community had 8 high schools, were canceled. Facilities were horrible. You didn't even have an 8-lane track anywhere, Zippo, nowhere. Okay? You had great athletes, but you didn't have a place to train. I actually had a men's and women's swimming program there. We had a small pool on campus. I had 3 high schools that used that pool on top of that. One of those high schools had never not won the state championship in West Virginia. Did you catch that? They had won every one of them. But, and you got to remember, that's men, that's women, times 4, university, 3 high schools. And then at the high school level, you got all the JV and all that other stuff. Trying to figure that out in terms of usage, that's just one little tiny example of all this. So they've got to have better facilities, and they want to have more community engagement, okay? And then the deeper, that's your highest goal, okay? And down here, your deeper fear is, I'm going to just map that. You've got really crappy facilities and community dissonance, which means they're not happy. I mean, oh my word, you're afraid to go outdoors. You know, don't look at the chat lines. I mean, you're just getting beat up 10 ways to Sunday. Okay, so you got, this is inhaling and exhaling right here in the middle. Okay? And we got to live our life in here making good decisions, good plans, so that we can get to this higher purpose. And if we mess up, or what we got going on gets stuck because you got 2 sides fighting against each other, this is what's going to happen down here. We'll never get off square one, and we won't be a change agent. So they got all these future goals and objectives, okay? And they got this past and present habits. I'm going to map that out a little bit for you here. This is easy to come up with, okay? You line up 18 sports, you line up university, you line up all those high schools. They got TVs, they got computers, they can tell you exactly what they want in facilities, with a change that they want. And a lot of that's because of the past. They've been a cradle of champions. Mary Lou Retton grew up there. The basketball program at that university has the highest, I mean, they had a head coach there for 19 years. To this day, has the highest winning percentage of any men's head basketball coach in the history of college basketball. No one has still ever broken. It's actually Mary Lou's uncle, JoJo Retton. Okay? So you're trying to figure out, you got to map this stuff out a little bit, because you got to answer the question, what's going on here? And then from that, you got to go back to your 5 C's. You're going to run to that first one on cash. If you can't untangle this stuff, you ain't going to get there. Okay? So what are some of the positive results from the past moving towards having better athletic facilities? Well, it is a cradle of coaches and champions. They do have die-hard fans. There's that whole Coalfield toughness, and believe me, that's a hard life. And from that, they've got a knack for finding a way. Okay, and you can see this is coming up with a financial plan to actually make this happen up here. Okay, these are the positive results if we focus on the future. All right, we've got to put together a plan. It's going to have some strategies to it. We're probably going to have to phase it because nobody's going to drop $100 million into our lap, and we're going to have to redevelop and expand to meet the needs of all these groups. You've got to increase the size of the pie, which is a nice way of saying stop fighting over who gets what slice. Okay, let's make the pie bigger. Let's make the facilities bigger. Let's make them better. So this one, ironically, yeah, they needed a phased expansion of women's sports. They needed a solid business plan. They didn't have an annual fund to take care of scholarship goals. They didn't have a capital campaign to take care of facilities. And this was also dealing with this community here. They had to do that to meet facility debt service. One of the things they did was they put synthetic turf on a community football field, but they never finished raising the money to do it. So here they're having to pay their annual, let's just call it mortgage, on the change that they made happen there. Of course, they didn't do anything to the stadium around it, so you still have this Depression-era stadium falling apart with new turf on it, but they got ahead of things because they didn't have a good plan to move forward. What do you think you think people were happy with that? Oh, heavens, no. And then actually we added some sport management programs there. All right, what's the downside? What's below here? When things aren't going well in the past, all right, what are some of the things you diagnosed, okay? And you can see your green flags and your red flags. What's that mean? A red flag means this is going to be a cue to you when things are going amiss. You need to get in there and untangle them. And the green flag is, hey, this is a cue to you that's moving along. Let them do their thing, stay out of their way. Prevailing interest. Okay, they've won a lot of championships in those 3 sports there, but they never invested in the other sports too. Well, you got the momentum of everybody winning, succeeding, participating. You're going to be even stronger. They were fighting over one piece of the pie. You had all kinds of political power dynamics and personal interests going on. You had a lot of apathy and complaint. Somebody wanted to blame somebody. And, they wanted to win championships like they did in the past. They never worked the plan. So other people moved past them. And they were flying by the seat of their pants. They hadn't figured out how to change their finances and their revenues. Over here on the future end of this, again, they were fighting over just pieces of the pie, which is, very similar there. They had a lot of impatience, okay? They'd get in the bind and they'd add a sport or they'd do a stadium project before they had the money to sustain it. If they can't self-sustain, you didn't make a good decision. And it might look good for a day or two, but given enough time, you just painted a target on your chest from a leadership standpoint. They were living on credit. Whether it was facility, scholarship, it's better to wait and do it right than be in too big a hurry. And they had imbalance in experience. They were just being over-reliant on the wrong sources there. You say, golly, Scott, that's kind of complex. Where'd that come from? It came from a lot of meetings in the community. came from meetings with fans, came from meetings with alumni, came from meetings with student athletes. I remember interviewing there, and a football player came up to me. I still remember it because it really made me step back. He said, "If you come here and be the director, will you take care of our grass?" I said, "You just flew me in here from the west to ask me if I could take care of your grass?" That's how bad it was. No, you couldn't grow grass on the field. It was mud. I mean, it was on top of a mountain that had, it was just a mess. You had all these competing things here. You have to untangle it and say, okay, what do you want? You want facilities to get better. Okay? All right, if we don't have a good plan, are they going to get any better? You're just going to have a big fight. Quite frankly, you won't survive in that situation, because if their expectations are higher than the resources and revenues you can generate, they'll find a new you. It's not going to change the goals, but they'll find a new you. Okay?
So, pertaining to what you're talking about, in what order did you start trying to cipher stuff out as far as, like you said, either dealing with athletics or do you want facilities? In what order did you start, ciphering stuff out to, start making the money flow again, I guess?
Okay, and how did I prioritize it?
Yes, sir.
It's a very good question on that. This is my web page for the people backstage who meet with me, or I meet with people above me too, that, okay, you got to diagnose it. And then from that, you establish your priorities. Okay, for me, I'm going to run, you're not necessarily, in my mind, going to number them. You have to also look at, for example, I'll just give you an example from that. One of the things they did with that, probably one of the biggest things, was change playing surfaces on some on-campus fields. Okay, how did I do that? Well, in the state of West Virginia, they actually have a general equity fee. You can start it, and you can increase it once. After that, you can't touch it forever. Okay, so they had one. It was small. And we raised that. You don't have to go to a vote there. You may now. You didn't then. Okay? So what are some of the things we did to do that? Okay? Well, we identified sports in that region and in that division to have women's sports. I got to think for a minute. We'd identified women's lacrosse, because that school's about 20 miles, 30 miles from Pennsylvania. It's a big high school sport up there. Plus, at that time, there's probably only about 50 Division II lacrosse programs. So, I get B is better than 30, and you're in the top 20. We identified women's soccer. And then what we did is, if you were to take kind of baseball, softball, and our football field, we actually did synthetic surface, probably even more square footage than that. We knocked off the top of a mountain, put a nice fence around it. And in that was football, but it was also lined and set up for, and we actually put softball over in a section of it, and lined it off for soccer and women's lacrosse. At the same time, we got with those 3 school districts, because they were playing lacrosse, girls soccer, all that kind of stuff. We put together actually a usage schedule, because we had that fee, but we needed more money too, okay? Because when you put down synthetic, in 8 years, you're going to need to put it down again. So you got to be setting aside every year a self-sustaining revenue source so you can replace it. So we did all the usage schedules across that continuum. Well, you say, well, was that your highest priority? Well, you have to remember, we all have biases. We think that's a bad word, okay? You have favorite things, is what it means in simple terms, because you're a product of your experience and you're a product of your values. One of the most important things in making those decisions is simply to be aware of your own bias and sometimes to tell people that bias. Why did we run to that project as one of the first stops? Why was that the priority? Because there, and I'm going to say it just in the wrong, I don't care which one we run to first. We have to identify what's the source of revenue that we can first get to with greatest success, to start the process of the momentum of building and change. So it actually may be a lot of times people say, well, it's got to be for football, or it's got to be for whatever your favorite sport is. But that may not be the quickest source of revenue for you. You know, and people say, well, I know if you dumped everything into that, you generate more revenue. Well, that's because they've been watching on TV. You got to know your landscape, okay? Just because it's on ESPN doesn't mean what's happening in Durham, North Carolina is going to happen in your hometown, okay? But you could take from that and make it happen in a different way in something else. That's a long answer. The short version is run to where you got the best shot to get it going and create that momentum. Because that momentum will bring those other projects along and will generate the trust and the confidence and a deeper shared vision in those people on moving the other projects forward. They'll be more inclined to work and to work together to get there.
I have another question. You know, I think you were talking about as far as facility-wise, do you think that a big input as far as, you know, generating revenue would be from the student body, specifically speaking to the athletes as far as, you know, promoting ways to, you know, have athletes buy into the whole program as a whole versus, what's what I'm trying to think of? I'm trying to have athletes buy into the program to where they want to get back and help versus, you know, doing it through, making for like facilities and stuff like that, but you know, just having the athletes to where you give them a type of incentive to where they want to help the program that they're playing for.
It's a very good question. It's one of the most powerful things that can happen. What you're asking is, do they see the vision? Are they taking ownership of it? And later on in life, they're going to pay it forward. There's so many more powerful examples. We can say, are they the Ivy Leagues? Well, yeah, but the better definition of it, they're at your older institutions. I'm a product of two really old ones, one in the 1700s, one in the early 1800s, okay? And then it becomes a culture from that standpoint. What you've got going on, particularly in Division I right now, is a lot of kind of sense of entitlement, or, well, I got to have that. Well, you got to unravel what you can do, okay? I'll jump to a slide, okay? This is trip myself here, fiscal year 12, so that's 2011-12. And the only reason it's from that is you're always a year in arrears. But these presidential dashboard, we just filed ours in the middle of January, okay, so last year's isn't out yet, so I simply can't get to it yet. And this is probably that much paper boiled down to one slide, okay? So in that particular year, the revenues for athletic department here were about $5.5 million, okay? There are two categories in here that really aren't a part of the department. That's your indirects. You're probably not familiar with that term. Dr. Lund would be from a research standpoint. You have to ascribe a value to, people in payroll and in HR. They process things for your employees. There's a value ascribed to that. So we don't pay for that directly. And the other category would be Spirit Squad. So there's about $500,000, actually probably $550,000 in that revenue line there. That's a little bit more like air, or you ascribe a value, and it cancels out on expenditures. Okay, so both those figures are about, let's call it $500,000 higher. These are the three general lines of revenue within the department. This is an extremely heavy reliance on student fees. Okay, we're watching the basketball tournament. Coastal Carolina played Virginia in the first round. Coastal Carolina is a member of the Big South Conference. Okay, that conference has the highest average student athletic fee at any level, actually, in our country. It's actually over $1,500 per student, averaged across all of those institutions. Okay, the highest one, and they're not very good in basketball. You can look at the Sagarins. Is Longwood University in Farmville, Virginia. Their student athletic fee is $2,000 a year. Yours is $234 a semester. You get a chance to vote on whether that goes up another $26. Okay, Longwood actually, and ironically, as was I think every school in the Big South Conference, they were all Division IIs, before that NAIs, which is our history too. Okay? So one could say they're paying a lot more money to play the same people. What are they pursuing? They want to be at March Madness. They're pursuing some of this revenue stuff here, but at the same time, does Longwood University have the same baseball or basketball facilities as a University of Virginia or Virginia Tech in the same state who are both ACC members? No. Will they? Probably not, unless they have a sugar daddy somewhere embedded into their institution, okay? That they've been cultivating for a long period of time. This is a real heavy reliance on it. What am I sharing on that end? And this is one of the 5 C's. Okay, what are your sources of revenue? Are they balanced or are they not balanced? The revenue generated, that's really in 2 simple categories, your gifts and your sales. In Division II, that's actually one of the highest in the country. So you use that as part of also your decision-making and evaluation of programs. Hey, do we have good annual giving? Do we have good corporate sponsorships? And you got to keep growing that revenue and growing that along the way. But you can see it's over a quarter of your revenue lines. The bottom one's your total institutional support. I'm going to hurry up and finish here, but not to leave you dangling. This is one of the lower ones in Division II, okay? Now, the majority of Division I, that's higher, but, and you can see we weren't balanced there. I had about a $500,000 gap, so that means I got $500,000 in debt. All the 24 of your 315 Division Is 1 year ago, they were all in debt, a lot bigger number, okay? So, the total institutional support is out of whack. And it gets out of it from that standpoint. I haven't done a good job of answering your question. You really made a statement in many ways. Does this work better if student athletes in the entire community, which is none of those C's, have a simple, clear understanding of where you're trying to go and how you operate? And you asked it in a specific facility context, do they understand, hey, this is what we have, this is why we have what we have. And a lot of times people think if I yell louder, they'll have to do something. Well, not really. Go back to that map. You're going to be down in the bottom part of that because yelling is just, it's not the full inhale and exhale thing. Okay? How do we do this with partnerships to get there? How do we do this with partnerships to move forward? Yeah, we got a new track and synthetic surface. None of it came out of fees. None of it came out of generated revenues, and none of it came out of institutional support. Where did it come from? Well, it came from creating 4 new partners, 2 ISDs, UIL, and the City of Kingsville. Now, does the greater population know that? No, I think by the University of Iowa woke up and they put a lot of money into it. I can see what they care about. Well, no. It's back to that example. Was it my highest priority? Not necessarily. But I had 2 ISDs that were interested, and their boards are willing. All right, let's run with that, because that momentum helps lead to the others. Doesn't mean that you don't care about others. It means the potential partners aren't quite there in the others. I better shut up or I'll go over time. Does that help?
Yeah, if you can have help, then take it.
Exactly. You're not going to get there by yourself. That's my, I know that whole polarity thing's a little complex, but partnership, you're not going to get there by yourself. You have got to be able to untangle those things and identify mutual needs. That's the whole gig on this referendum thing. Okay, what's this audience want? What's that audience want? What's this one want? How do you do this? It makes it harder to explain in a quick sort of way. But if you can answer the question, does this move us all forward? And the answer is yes. Great. Keep having all those little conversations and move that plan forward. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. We'll get into part 2 on Wednesday then.
Yeah.